Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to Openshift.tv. We are live streaming to Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. I am joined today by Zohaib Khan. He is going to be talking to us a lot about CodeReady Workspaces, which has been a widely requested topic on the channel. So I'm going to let him introduce himself and why he's here to present this topic to us.
Thank you, Chris. I am application modernization practice lead at Red Hat. And basically what that means is that I help customers adopt emerging technology. By profession, by trade, I've been a developer / architect for God knows how many years. I've put systems to production, dealt with the fires, had to put them out. So, it's not a fun experience, but when you emerge out of that, you learn a lot. So I did that for healthcare, did that for financial services and government space. And
you did that for the hard stuff.
Yeah. And I joined Red Hat as a consulting domain architect. I was running a practice of application modernization. And then I joined sales side, where I run the application modernization practice for Red Hat. And I love doing this because it helps me see firsthand how customers are struggling and how we can help.
So absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of places we can help, especially nowadays, which is why I think this topic is so important, right? Like, CodeReady Workspaces allows folks to really kind of take their development environments and put them on steroids if they want, right? Yeah. Like, sky is kind of the limit, and it's reproducible and it's repeatable and it's controllable, right? Like you can actually like maintain and constantly have updated development environments and have new releases of your development environments along with releases of your software, which is pretty cool, I think, too. So yeah, like CodeReady Workspaces is a really, really cool product to me. Just talking to a lot of folks lately, talking to a lot of developers lately, like, what are some of the struggles you hear from people that are working remotely right now that maybe they weren't normally used to working remotely, right? Like, what are those struggles that you're seeing and hearing about lately?
Yeah, so, part of my job, actually big part of my job, is talking to developers day in and day out and understanding their struggles. So COVID actually brought a very interesting twist to this because a lot of developers, let me actually share my screen so that, I can show you exactly.
Sorry.
So, okay. If you can please confirm.
Not that we did. Yes, your screen is perfect. Okay. Not that we didn't appreciate your face.
Well, you can see my face as well in a small tiny box at the top. But
yeah.
So part of my job is to talk to developers on a regular basis and understand their struggles. So one of the biggest struggles recently has been adoption of DevSecops actually. And it's a lot of pieces. If you look at Cloud Native Computing Foundation, right? The amount of projects are crazy. Like sometimes, like you can't even, name some of those. So these developers have to be at the cutting edge, and a lot of times, and have to produce something. So if you throw all that kitchen sink at them, and now you have to make sure that they are productive, the adoption of DevSecOps has clearly been the front runner in terms of their struggles. And this is the framework that I have sort of created after several conversations, which is, generally applications are done in a certain manner, whether they are being developed as a traditional monolithic application or take your pick, web applications or client server applications, right?
Yep.
And it's fine for, let's say, a few folks who started that application and they can create the setup and all that. But how do you scale in terms of teams? So as your team grows, 5, 6, 10 people, you keep adding. How do you bring them up to speed? So streamlining has been the first struggle, like regardless of the application type.
Yeah.
Onboarding developers and also helping them, get productive. How do they understand the code? And now they can fix bugs, implement features. So that's one struggle that I see. And people deal with that in a certain way. And the other struggle is they going cloud native. So if they haven't started in that direction, And there are good reasons to start with monolith first.
Right.
In fact, yeah, I would recommend for certain applications to start with mini monoliths and then transition to cloud native. And if that's where most of the effort has been, then how do you venture into cloud native with all the buzzwords and new projects that you have to deal with? So as I said, like, this is the first struggle, like streamlining. How do we streamline? And the second struggle is how do we go cloud native, frankly, right? So when they come together, that's something that forms, the what I want to call it, the nightmare scenario for developers to actually conquer these two narratives and emerge as a cutting edge team. So there's a lot of learning involved. There's a lot of tools that they have to learn. There's a lot of methodologies. And then when you throw DevSecOps, there's a cultural element. So these has been, pretty much the major struggles that I've seen. And, I appreciate the work that the developers do. I've been an architect developer all my life. And when it comes to, how can we make their job easier? It actually drives me, because I remember back in the day, if somebody could have given me a tool, like we used to use Ant, I'm dating myself, but we used to use Ant build tool. If some of your folks remember, then Maven came out and some of the new tools came out, right?
Yep.
So that was a leap back in the day. So CodeReady Workspace, in a sense, represents today's leap. So that's some of the issues that I'm seeing across the board with the developers.
That's cool. So Waleed, one of our biggest fans of the channel, he says in chat here, our dev teams still want local dev environments. They're not buying into editor plugins, remote builds, and deployments. I'd like to hear more about how you can convince them about the features CRW brings. So that's focusing on that cultural piece, right?
Yes.
Like, so and this is where you and I can both help with this one. So.
So that's a great question, actually. That's something that I get asked on a regular basis. And look, I mean, I really don't want this to become a either or proposition, because, there are good reasons for why developers use certain tools. Heck, I come across developers who use VI, or Vim, for example, for code editing. And they're super, super productive. They love that. And they are so fast. Like, I can't even blink my eye and they're like 3 screens forward, That's how productive these guys are. And for the love of God, I don't want to take that away from them, right? I want to make sure that they are getting the enough support that they need. So the question of, hey, how do we transition from this to that? The way I answer this is take this as a complement, not as an exclusive step, right? Let me give you an example. Imagine yourself in a scenario where you're dealing with 2 to 3 projects. I'm being conservative here.
When you have your webcam, by the way.
Yeah, let me get that.
Yeah. Sorry, folks. But to help with the cultural piece, right? Like, nobody wants to stop developer progress. Everybody wants to help developers move faster. Right. Yep. If you give them the tools they want, you'll be good, right? But like, there's always something, right? Like, it's always the 80-20 rule is like, what I've seen often. And, how do we address some of that, quasi effectiveness without impeding kind of thing?
Yep. So the question that I tell my developers to, is basically, don't take this as an either or proposition. Take this as a complementary, because what ends up happening is that you will, come across situations where you have to do something really quick and dirty. And those are the scenarios. So let me give you an example. If you have a bug fix that's coming up, you have already moved on to a few other projects, right? And you have changed your workspace, you have changed your, development environment completely. how do you then come back to that when there's a bug or defect that's identified in the QA cycle or advanced, staging cycle, for example? Um, you have to recreate that environment. If you're lucky, you have saved it and all that kind of stuff. Imagine if you can just click on a single URL, and we call it factory URL. Imagine you can just click it and the workspace comes orchestrated in front of you as part of the web browser. And now you can actually fix that code, quickly test it, and run it in that environment, and then get going, right? So it takes the pressure off of you to have tens of hundreds of combinations and permutations of environments available at your desk all the time, and frees you up to basically pick your tool of your liking and start using CodeReady Workspace at your own pace. And when you are comfortable, then maybe jump into it head first and test it out. See what it's capable of, see where you like it. You're always going to miss local ID. I mean, I'm a developer, so I'm just going to be honest about that. But when it comes to scaling the team, when it comes to getting work done from a large number of developers, that's where CodeReady Workspace shines. So we actually give you both environments, like we give you both combinations. How can you run CodeReady Workspace alongside with your local IDE and use our APIs to connect to the server side and use the tool of your choice and take the transition as it comes and use CodeReady when it's convenient, and use it to your strength, to its strength, and then continue to use your ID if you want to do local development. And I think scaling development teams is what I would call a biggest use case that I've seen so far.
Yeah, like I think when we talk about CodeReady Workspaces, I think the good examples are the folks that are a high number of developers, which inevitably ends up in a high amount of turnover, which inevitably ends up in a lot of time spent setting up dev environments. So that's where CRW comes in. CodeReady Workspaces comes in and answers that question for you. Waleed, to help you kind of on your way, right? Like, I think it's the DevOps approach, right? Like, you don't need an elephant all at once. I think the best case for you, Waleed, is to probably like start building out that CRW environment, get some of those wins under your belt, get some developers on the platform, get some folks kind of collaborating together. Maybe you can get a whole, team together to do it on CRW, and they can start showing off their own wins, or you could start showing off their wins for you, kind of thing. I think that might be the best approach for you, Waleed, because that is a cultural kind of shift that has to happen as well, right? Like, cloud native thinking is a different way of thinking, and cloud native development at scale is a different kind of development, right? Like, lots of moving pieces, constantly pipelines running, security tooling always flying across the map, just doing everything, logs flying, events going everywhere. That is cloud native development, and managing that and keeping everyone's environment and tool chains up to date so they don't accidentally inject bad code into the pipeline.
Right. And it's funny you say
huge
that.
Part of this process.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because, let me just fast forward to one of the things that I show to my customer is this is the bill of materials of developers' day in a life of developer kind of thing. Like, these are the things that they have to deal with, like project sources, dependencies, debuggers, command line, build packaging, terminal, operating system, yada, yada, yada. And just look the sheer volume of things that they have to juggle, right? And if everything, needs updating, versioning, you can forget about, this bottom stack right here. The top stack, maybe, yes, project sources, dependencies, sure, you can version control that, but you can't go anything beyond that. So this is something that is very much in the daily lives of each developer. Like, you can probably manage project sources and dependencies in Git. You can manage some of these things, like tooling, command lines, and build packaging in the IDE itself. So if you use Eclipse, Intellij, that kind of stuff. But this bottom stack is also very important. Like, if you have a Linux distribution that you have installed in your local VM, for example, you have a database running, you have all these other things that are running as part of the local ecosystem. How do you then take that and manage that in unison? There isn't a single way, right? And if you extrapolate this, the source code is actually living on the laptop. So if you are a developer who is working for the government, or any IP project, like Apple, for example, or take any company, like then this is a risk. Like the source code is living on your laptop. How do you secure it? If the laptop is lost, yes, it is encrypted, I grant you that.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, don't give it as a challenge to people. Like, they will crack that code and get into that. And
if someone handed me a hard drive from Apple and said that the next 5 years of products were on that, I would go to a lot of effort to like decrypt it. Right? Absolutely.
So just see for yourself. Like, you are dealing with this 3 or 4 levels of abstractions, and you have to secure that as an enterprise at endpoint for each developer. So it becomes a lot of challenge, like big challenge to manage, frankly, right?
Yeah.
And the way CodeReady Workspace solves that problem is basically gives all of this in a single managed containerized workspace that is centrally hosted, and your environment comes to life in a web browser, and source code is actually not downloaded to your computer. I mean, yes, you get a window into the source code through the web browser, and that gets erased as soon as you move off of that screen. So you are not downloading all the source code. It's actually getting delivered secure in the web browser or an HTTPS connection, and it can be centrally managed. It can be provisioned centrally, and there are some interesting use cases, frankly, that I'm seeing our government customers actually use this for. So I'll talk about that.
Let's put a pin in that for a second. I love the fact that this solves a problem that I had 10 years ago. Right, like 10 years ago, I needed to push development environments as a IT shop. Right, like my developers needed their development environments consistent, and they were hard to put together. So they said, we're going to build vagrant boxes. And if you know anything about vagrant boxes, they're not small. Right. So you could put everything in a vagrant box. You can version the vagrant box. You could do everything you want with the vagrant boxes, but it's a lot of bandwidth when you're dealing with 30, 40 developers. Imagine 150, 200 developers, how much more it would be. So, all of a sudden your data center's 95th percentile just goes through the roof, and you're just downloading development environments. You haven't produced any value yet. You're just getting started. And it's great that this now exists. So, like, compare this. I use VS Code with the Vim plugin. Like, I'm an old Vim user, right? Like, I wrote my first website in Vim back in the 90s, but I am now a VS Code user, and I'm starting to use more of the stuff in VS Code and less of the stuff on the command line. So this is really interesting to me as well. Like, where do I plug in with my VS Code IDE right now into CodeReady Workspaces? Or, if there's another IDE I can use, how do I plug in? What can you tell me there?
Yeah, so great question, by the way. And let me just bring in another screen over here that I can show you.
Sweet.
So I will forgive you if you have mistaken this to be a Visual Studio Code. Because this may look very, very familiar.
Right.
And this is actually a CodeReady Workspace running in a web browser, right?
Can you blow that up a little? Like,
you mean
zoom in? Yeah, just hit present mode. Yeah,
okay,
that'll work.
Yeah,
there you go.
So what we deliver as part of CodeReady Workspaces, I mean, when it started, we took Eclipse as a standard IDE and made it available. But people have different preferences, and we understand that. In fact, a lot of our team, like evangelist team, works very much with VS Code. And not only that, but we have developed some of the strong performing plugins for Visual
Hmm.
Studio Code.
Yeah.
Our Openshift plugin and one of the Java plugin is actually one of the top plugins at Microsoft Store, by the way.
Yep. No,
So
yeah, I have 2 or 3. I think I'm opening VS Code right now.
right,
Red Hat
right,
extensions installed, right? Like already, just for
right.
my day-to-day work.
Yep. So if you want Visual Studio Code type of experience, we are delivering that to you in CodeReady Workspace version 2.0, which was released a few months ago, and this is
Mm.
what it looks like. So
Yeah, I mean that looks a lot like VS Code to
yeah,
me.
it
It's
can
just in my
run
browser.
plugins.
Yeah,
Yeah, it can run Visual Studio plugins, Visual Studio Code plugins. So you
nice.
can bring in your existing plugins in there, and you can actually, you won't miss. Let me just say that. If you miss the Visual Studio experience, we will get very, very close to it. So
I won't miss having to do the compute locally. I know that much
yep.
because whenever I'm doing anything with an IDE on a live stream, I know it's not exactly like on my laptop. At least it's a little laggy sometimes. So I don't know why that is. Maybe the language server or whatever. But it does seem laggy at times if I'm doing video and any kind of work in VS Code. So
Yeah.
that's
So
encouraging.
yeah, I mean, it gets delivered in the browser, so the server does the heavy lifting here,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's where I think we solve part of your problem, right? As a developer,
Hmm.
I would prefer learning locally for some workloads, frankly, and then I would prefer a server to provide me a cluster and this type of environment, which is fully integrated, that I can just implement a feature and move on, right?
Right.
So it's great for
So
that. Mhm.
but under the hood, I'm getting more than just the IDE, right? With CodeReady Workspaces, right? Like I get the whole environment, right? Like it's not
Yes.
just like it's a configured environment. It's not just handing me an IDE and telling me to configure it myself and install the plugins, right? Like, yeah, I can install the plugins I want, right? Like I need a linter for YAML and I need a linter for JSON. I like rainbow indent, like stuff like
Right.
that. But what else is in this that's driving me towards this as opposed to what's on my desktop right now?
So the way I would look at it is, if you are a developer and you are struggling to, let's say, understand Kubernetes, or or getting into the flow, or maybe you have worked with the Kubernetes before, but you wish that somebody has provided you an easy button that you don't have to deal with, let's say, some of the deployment descriptors and that kind of stuff. What if you could just dive in headfirst into the development? CodeReady Workspace is that answer. So let me show you another screen over here, and real quick. So this is a typical picture of how CI/CD pipeline looks like. So starting from dev all the way to UAT, there are several steps involved. And without CodeReady Workspace, it looks something like this. You have a developer developing the IDE, local IDE, doing unit test, and essentially checking the code in Git. And that's where the CI/CD kicks off. You do several things: code quality scan, security
Mm.
scan, integration test, UAT test, so on and so forth. But what happens is that the developer may have moved on, right? Especially if the code has
Oh yeah.
gone to
Oh
integration
yeah.
test,
Yeah. Yeah.
UAT,
Yeah.
they may have moved on. They have moved on to another defect, another project, so on and so forth. So what if there is a high priority defect that needs to be fixed? As I said, earlier, they now have to come back and recreate that environment. So with CodeReady, you are actually getting this, which is, we extend the experience, the development experience, into a running cluster in itself. That's number one.
Wow.
So you get a
Nice.
fully baked OpenShift cluster at your disposal as part of this, right? So you have the full power of Kubernetes and it under your fingertips. That's number one. Number two, if you don't want to deal with deployment files and writing Kubernetes, YAML files, you can actually create a project in CodeReady Workspace, and it will do the heavy lifting for you. So it will create all the artifacts for you and give you a nice integrated IDE that I just showed, and you can actually do development right away. right? If you are a developer and kind of, sometimes we think that, oh, do I have to learn a lot to get productive on Kubernetes? Well, it used to be the case. We are trying to make it, trying to change the paradigm where we're giving you ready to go bits where you can actually start to use CodeReady Workspace and accelerate your adoption of Kubernetes, so you can actually start writing your Java code because that's what you're familiar with, or C++ or C Sharp, or take your pick, right? That's your key strength. Now use that strength to build depth in Kubernetes. That's a different paradigm. If I tell you, Chris, now that you have to learn Kubernetes and start to produce code in there, what would you do? I'm sure you would say, like, let me dive headfirst in Kubernetes,
okay,
right?
Give me a cluster.
Right. Yeah.
That's exactly what I would say.
Right. And you have to learn a lot of like networking and storage and that kind of stuff. Those are important bits, don't get me wrong. But if you have to write a quick microservice, then the learning curve could be quite a bit.
Very steep. That's very steep. If I already know how to write a microservice, the Kubernetes curve is steep.
Right. So we are making it easy, and we are giving you this environment. So green one is the CodeReady Workspace, which runs under an Openshift cluster, which is full Kubernetes, by the way. And as from the time that you develop unit test, you can actually see the results of some of the code scanning and security scanning up front. And this goes in line with the shift left for the security, right? So bringing most of the concerns in your development experience so that you don't have to deal with them after the fact, where you will be called to fix a bug or defect in integration environment or UAT environment where it's more expensive. So you can actually see the results of those up front. And that basically drives down the cost of development quite a bit, the cost of fixing bugs quite a bit, and what actually gets checked in to the CI/CD system and gets transferred over is a really good quality of code. So I think that's worth the price of admission, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, like if I'm a crappy Go coder like I am, I really kind of want that evaluation before I check in my code, right? I mean,
if you can write Go, then you are way ahead of a lot of people already.
Well, I mean, the fact that I can write Go and just script together something that does something is trivial. But the fact that like I'm a crappy programmer in general and I can get code quality checking right there, like to me, right there is like a godsend, right? Because that takes away like my problems with like syntax checking and everything else, and all the things quality wise that my company wants that I might not completely understand the why or how behind. Like that's going to be in there, happening as I work. That way I don't have to go back and fix it later. Oh yeah, that one thing, recommit. No, it's going to be constantly sitting there in your IDE, kind of just churning along with you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean that's huge. That's huge. So, I see that as a big benefit to folks that use our IDE. I don't know. I mean, I think as security shifts left, you're going to see more folks moving towards these centralized things because they can build these things into the pipeline, and it's not just more compute running on all these different devices, right? Like it's not something you have to install on your local machine and you're wasting compute on this thing. And, there's 500 machines that are now doing the exact same thing every time someone writes a line of code, right? Like that. Let's use our compute wisely, right? Like I know we have laptops and everything everywhere, but like just because you have it doesn't mean you have to use it all the time, right? Exactly. We have servers too, So I try to offload the work I do to anything that keeps it off my local machine if I can, right? Like I want this thing to be as fast as possible. So if I can offload something, I'm all about that. So I mentioned shifting left. Is there a benefit to CodeReady Workspaces for Devsecops? I mean, I get it here. Maybe you can draw it out a little bit more for us.
Yeah. So this starting from this picture, imagine yourself as somebody who is either getting into DevSecOps as a developer and as a team, or DevSecOps, but now you have to create that tool chain for yourself to try to be very productive. there will always be something. Let me get this out of the way first. There will always be something that you have to set up, right? So that doesn't go away, but
Right.
it becomes easier. So this picture alone, actually, let me use this one. As part of DevSecOps adoption, you get a fully integrated experience with your favorite IDE, integrated with the CI/CD pipeline running on the same cluster that you are writing code on, right? And not only that, but you can actually see when you produce something, how does it behave? So you to eliminate this whole notion of, hey, it's working on my laptop. I have my
Right.
VM set up and I have my small Kubernetes cluster set up and it's working. So when I check in the code, it should work over there. You eliminate that completely.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the holy grail of DevSecOps adoption for developers, because they have other things to take care of. Their life is, it, they have to juggle a lot of tools, utilities to be productive. They extract value out of every single thing. And we are just saying, guys, we understand your pain point. Let us just help you out with this so that we make it easy for you to jump in head first into DevSecOps and, get it, be productive. This goes very well towards organizations who are trying to streamline DevSecOps. And there's a story of a customer that I spoke to. They tried DevSecOps or DevOps adoption several times and failed. And they created a team called DevOps. Like, there was a QA team, there was a development team, there was different teams,
Yeah.
and there was a DevOps team. Well,
Mm.
that's fine. That's how it starts. But then they gave up because the whole, this whole overload of, how do we make sense out of these tools? Like, there are 2 or 3 of each, where you have, like, 2 or 3 version controls, 2 or 3 CI/CD pipelines, 2 or 3 of everything. Now, how
Right.
do you shrink it to a
Mm.
useful set and also streamline it? This is it. you know so this is how CodeReady Workspace can help you get started from a developer standpoint, be productive, and then build the depth as you see fit, right? So you can learn a little bit more about Kubernetes, and then you know
Yeah.
still be productive on day one. And
So yeah, it's so that old mantra of DevOps. It used to be like, before DevOps, developers would just throw code over a wall. This essentially helps lower the wall.
yep, yep,
Right? Like, that wall becomes a lot easier now, because using all this tooling built into the IDE, right? Like, you are giving feedback, you are getting feedback, you are giving feedback. There is a cycle there. Things are happening, right? Like,
yep,
that is all occurring under the hood, just
yes,
as you're kind of working along here, right? Like,
yes,
that's, I think, that right there is a huge win, right? Like,
yes.
if my company's initiative right now is moving security left, I pick this up and I say, well, this puts a lot of security in the right places. it, does this force developers to learn any of this tooling, or is there a gotcha here, right? Like, as we put more things in the IDE, is it more things they have to learn?
So that's a great question. And I say that we are trying to meet where you are today. So if I go back to my other picture, which is this one, right? We are trying to come up with a familiar face. That's number one. So if you're used to Visual Studio Code, we give you that experience. You may still find a few things that may not be there. That's why local ID exists, but a large portion of your experience is here, right? So that's number one. And number two, you get this fully baked experience, which is just this. So if you are familiar with writing code in Visual Studio Code, for example, you can be productive right away. You don't have to learn, you know, Kubernetes 101 from day one, as long as the cluster is provisioned and some team has taken care of all the plumbing underneath, which is usually ops team that does it. you can actually write code and bring in your existing project and just release it, right? And as you get more and more familiar with this environment, you can start to play around and say, hey, how does scale up works? How does clustering works? So let me go back to this picture again. Like, you can take a look at the right, where it shows you the topology of your application. You can say, what happens if I increase another pod? So you can see that pop in real time as you are, running your application in a dev environment, right then and there.
Just tab over, done. There
Exactly.
it is.
So this is what I call is get comfortable and then start learning at your own pace. And
Nice.
that's a great position to be in, because you are productive on day one with the knowledge that you bring, with the tools that you know today, with the language that you are familiar with today, and then start to build the depth, one piece at a time. Frankly, that's how I've learned a lot of new languages in my career. And a lot of developers that I speak to, they do that the same way. So they learn something a little bit, they want to play with it, then they do something, then they learn something, they play with it, and that's continues. And we are giving you a same paradigm with Kubernetes.
That's awesome. All right, so let's see so can you actually show me like what it looks like kick some tires on it, like under the hood kind of deal?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So what I've done is I have created a video of this for this session, so that I can walk you through. Can you see my screen, Chris?
Yep, we're good. Yep.
So this is an example of when the developer logs into the CodeReady workspace.
Nice.
So the first thing that we present to you is a quick start. So this quick start is, as you can see, it's quite a bit of languages, diversified. You can see your Java right here, and let me actually play it. You can see your Java right here, Thorntail, Fuse, Apache Camel, JavaScript. If you're a Vertex fan, Quarkus fan, C++. We support .NET Core development.
Nice.
Go, PHP, Python. So this is something that comes out of the box. And when you click on it, you basically are taken into something like this, where you can create the project and bring your code in. And this is what I'm showing in this video, how this building a project works, and the integrated terminal as part of this. So you can see, and I apologize for the low resolution over here.
Oh, you're fine.
This is the Java code, which is syntax highlighted. All the classes and everything are being recognized, just like your local Visual Studio code. We are running a few plugins on the right, so you can see the methods and the the members, for example, over here. And what I've done over here is I've just kicked out a build that is running on the server side, and it's running the build, and you're seeing the results. And at the same time, you can open a terminal window and start to work your way through anything else as part of this. And you can see if there are any issues, it shows right here. If you have code documentation, I usually do a to-do documentation. Like, so if I have to implement something, that shows up. Same thing as Visual Studio Code that's running locally. And there's this map of the code that is also visible. As you can see, it's actually a plugin that gets enabled, right? So we take that and we give you a way to bring your existing plugins into this ecosystem. So there's this whole notion of supporting what right from day one. So that's what it looks like in a nutshell. Yes, it is a different experience because it's delivered in the browser, and you may not see that on day one. Like people have different perceptions. So what I say to them is give it a shot. Like try to use it for like small little use case that you have and see where it can help you. So this is what it looks like.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. That's very, very cool. Very, very slick. So, folks, questions, concerns, comments, complaints. Have you tried CodeReady Workspaces? What doesn't it do? This is good feedback time for us, right? Like, we would appreciate feedback if you're using it. If folks, okay, so where do folks learn more about CodeReady Workspaces? Let's get that out of the way as the queue runs up for questions.
Yeah, so you can actually go to developer.redhat.com, and CodeReady Workspaces actually over there. So we have a strong web presence where we provide you with all the information on CodeReady Workspace. So let me actually show that.
Yeah,
Bring that
that'd be
screen.
great.
Yeah. So this is our main page of CodeReady Workspaces, and you can sign up for a free Red Hat developer account right here, and
Nice.
you can learn a lot about CodeReady Workspace. It shows you how to get started, and let me actually also show you one cool thing that you may not have seen before. So, people ask me, what does it look like when it's installed in an OpenShift cluster? So if you have played around with OpenShift, look, so we basically install this as an operator. And if you're not familiar with an operator, basically it's a Kubernetes construct that allows you to install software and keep it running. CoreOS actually came up with operators first, and we built CodeReady Workspace as an installable operator. And look, along with some other things that are running, I've installed CodeReady as an operator, and it shows that it's actually running. And this is where your OpenShift cluster is hosting the CodeReady Workspace. And what's good about this is that some of the customers have actually come to us and said, can we separate CodeReady with the rest of the environment? Because developers like to use new and shiny tools, and want to upgrade at a faster pace than the rest of the cluster. So you can actually run CodeReady in a separate OpenShift cluster, even on a separate appliance. So if you can actually set up, we have this new initiative that's going on where we build a box for you that comes with OpenShift installed, and it's ready to go. You just need to connect the wires and just power it up, and OpenShift is there for you. So if you have a team of developers that you just need to provide a development environment, guess what? You can bring in a brand new OpenShift cluster, latest version, and give this environment to the developers in a very controlled environment. It can live in your air-gap environment for government folks, for example. It can live in a separate network zone. It can basically be your small little ecosystem in itself. And you can beef it up as much as you want. So if you want to scale up, just add more hardware to that box and it will grow. And at the same time, you can connect to your existing cluster by just releasing the code. So as soon as you promote in Git, your existing OpenShift cluster, which may be on an older release, because sometimes it's not practical to upgrade the entire cluster in one shot, you can keep those two ecosystems separately. That can allow you to grow developer experience much more rapidly than the rest of the cluster. So keep everyone happy. So you talked about this healthy tension, Chris, earlier. Remember, like developers and throwing over the fence? Yeah. We actually give you a model that can satisfy both. So you can give the developers latest and greatest, and the ops can continue to run their cluster and they can upgrade at their own pace. So that's one of the use cases that's becoming very popular.
So there's a question here from Michael Henderson over on YouTube. I'm asking for a little more clarification, but we'll see. So they're pretty excited to get CRW up and running because setting up dev laptops is so involved. They're concerned about how to keep operators updated with latest versions of languages. So I'm not sure what the question is specifically, but if they're developing operators is what or are they worried about the version of Go coming from the operators?
So we can dissect this question in a couple of ways. So first is, I think if I understand correctly, how do they keep the stack up to date? That's how I read it at least once. So let me share my screen where I show you the environment. So apologize for this. So let me go back to this main screen where you saw this, right? So let's say a new version of Java comes or a new version of Python comes, and now you have to provision it. right? How do you do that? That's one use case. That's very common, actually. The way this works is that, let me show you the flow. So at any given point in time, architect and experts are the ones who are responsible generally for creating a stack, right? Test the stack. Like, if you're providing a specific version of Java, Java 11, Java 12, whatever, then you can actually provision that stack, test it out, and then make it available. And that will appear over here, right? That will appear as one of the items.
As a catalog item?
Exactly. Okay. Right? Yeah. So if somebody wants to choose the latest version of Java, they can actually start to create the project by clicking on that. So that's how you solve at least that part of the problem, where how do I make latest and greatest available to the developers? Mm-hmm. There is a way to do this. We call it dev file. So dev file is basically a YAML file. And basically what you do is you create your stack and provision it, and it's seen by the CodeReady Workspace. So the next time the developer logs in, he knows that he sees that, okay, there's a new item that's popped up. It's just fully tested and released.
So in Michael's case,
yeah.
So the operator came with Go 1.9. They were looking for Go 1.14. So they would just need to create one of these dev files with the latest version of Go. Done. So they could take the existing one potentially from, the catalog and then update to Go 1.14, test it, and off they go, essentially.
Yep. And, a lot of times, somebody has to do the heavy lifting behind this. And the way it works is that you will download the new container image for the latest version of Go, test it out. And this is what the architects and experts are doing, essentially. So they are downloading the latest secured bits that are GA'd by, let's say, Google or somebody, Red Hat even. And then they will test it out. It comes in the form of container image, and just kick the tires, make sure it's tested, and then provision it. And provisioning it as simple as writing a YAML file, and it's then visible. So you can have an older version of Go and newer version of Go both at the same time. And that's really the benefit of working with containers, frankly, because they give you the complete ecosystem right from the get-go. Right. So you can run older version of Go with new version of Go, and they can coexist in the same cluster without any problems. Can't do that with sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's actually harder to do like version developer environments.
Well,
right?
it's funny you say that.
And having people work on them at multiple stages of the development process. Yeah.
Yes. So it gets better. So when the architects actually provision the dev file, which is the definition of how the stack comes about, they can create a new version, and this is how it becomes available. So they version update the dev file with the latest Go, for example. It can be a complete replacement of the previous Go, or it can be in addition to it. So then, it gets provisioned and the developers just use it.
So you could have a Go project and say, oh, for this project, I need 1.14, I need 1.13, I need 1.12, so forth.
Yeah. So on. Okay. So you pick from this catalog, and basically developer has the choice.
Nice. Cool. So, and I'm sure there's a way we could probably automate the development of those if we could, there's a new version of Go detected, right, for my, architecture, right? Like there's probably a way you could bang out those in a pipeline somehow to where it just magically appears, I would imagine.
Yes. It depends on the organization's appetite for, to what extent. So, a good rule of thumb is just take one step at a time. Do certain manually first, see how they play out. And when you have attained a certain level of maturity, yes, you can actually automate it. Ansible comes into play, Jenkins come into play. All of this can be automated in a same or different OpenShift cluster, by the way. So if you have certain endpoints that you can watch for, it's very simple. Like, a new version of image comes up and you have Quay installed, for example. Quay can actually alert you, hey, there's a new version of something became available, or there's a new patch, CVE fix became available, or something. That something could be rel, that could be a Java patch, that could be anything in the stack. And once you get alerted, you can actually automate that process. Frankly, that's the value add of QA registry. It gives you those life cycle events.
Yeah. The life cycle. Imagine that, software development life cycle is
Life
involved
cycle,
here.
yeah.
Huh. Yeah, but and I think it's important, right? Like at some point in time, someone has to come along and clean up, right? Like clean up is such an important part of the life cycle, right? Like if it's here and it's crufty, you can get rid of it, right? Like if you do this in a good way, right? Like old versions of your dev environments don't have to linger around forever because you forget to delete them, or they're just on some server somewhere in some directory or some S3 bucket or whatever, right? And like people just keep paying the bill. No, like you actually come in here and you're like, oh wow, this is a mess. I need to clean this up.
Yeah.
And then you just go about the business of cleaning it up because it's all right here in front of you, everything you can develop with. And I'm assuming in a lot of different environments, like certain institutions will probably pull out some of these pieces, right? Like, we have no need for JS or something, right? Like we have no need for PHP. So they take these out potentially.
You can make it as tight as you want or as relaxed as you want.
Right. Exactly. I think that's kind of a nice feature of it as well. So Waleed asked a question, very kind of off topic-y, but it's operator related, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. Basically, can Waleed run four operators in 4.5? Probably not. It's not supported, I'll tell you that much, right? Like, can you run OLM 4.4 and 4.5? Maybe, probably, but it's not going to be supported, if that makes sense. So the biggest thing there, Waleed, is if you're going to do that, right, like you're going to be running in some unsupported configuration, be very careful. That's all. Yeah. So let's see. Michael says, working remote question. How survivable are CodeReady Workspaces to network drops, network latency, those kinds of things? What have we done there? Anything special?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And, we are moving into a new world where, I say this with a lot of thought behind it, is the paradigm is shifting from underneath us, where we were kind of living in a world, or are living in a world, where we have a beefy laptop that can run everything for us, right? But and take an example of a car. You put the key in, car starts, you go your way, to whatever. If you are driving a Tesla, it requires a connection, right? Intermittent, but it does require a connection. It can do software updates. It can do a whole bunch of things. It tracks your matrices and updates Tesla so they can see how the automated driving is going and things like that. That's becoming a new norm, in my opinion. And this paradigm is not, I don't look at it as an either or. I look at it as, having a tether with you, is becoming a lot more pervasive setup these days, right? So if obviously there's an underlying assumption is like you have a fast internet connection, or at least reasonably fast. But I've used CodeReady Workspace on a MiFi device sitting in an airport wait lounge without any issues, because it optimizes the traffic that flows between your browser and the server to an extent that it only downloads the bits that you need to see, and it's reasonably fast. And there's a mode that you can enable so you can actually work offline in there, and then as soon as you become online, it can sync, right? It's a little bit rusty, but we are getting there, right? So the provision is there, right?
Yeah.
So
okay. Yeah. So the feature is getting worked on, being built out, so that disconnected, like I'm working on an airplane, okay, checking all my changes kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. So think of this as you're now driving a Tesla, and that car requires connectivity to some extent. And with 5G becoming more and more pervasive in the next few years, you're going to see like 200 megabits connection on the road, which is going to be very common, right?
Right.
That's where the automated driving will be enabled, frankly, right? So
yeah, up here in the northern reaches and near a major metropolitan area of Detroit, right? Like we're gonna have multiple broadband options, either satellite from Starlink's, Tesla's thing, and then 5G from Verizon, AT&T, and those cats. And it's like, do we just buy a 5G router for the house because that's going to be faster than the competition?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, wow. Okay, so some questions here in chat. Let's see. Resources. What kind of resource utilization is needed? And when devs are done, what happens? So I'm assuming every workspace is a pod, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have like 20 developers working at a moment, and all of a sudden you have 19 developers, that pod goes away and the resources are reclaimed, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it just becomes reschedulable resources, correct?
Yes. So let me show you that picture also real quick. So while Chris is seeing the question, I'm teeing up the relevant slide right here.
There you go.
This is the deployment diagram of how CodeReady Workspace actually runs. So there's a CodeReady Workspace server that runs inside your Openshift cluster, right? And it connects with your existing LDAP Active Directory. And each workspace that you create as a developer is spun up as pod. So it's a collection of one or more containers, depending on the stack that you have. Sometimes, it's just runtime, application runtime. Sometimes it's runtime with the database. Sometimes it's with, HTTP server, so on and so forth. Depending on your, stack configuration, it spins up pod, and that can have multiple containers. And that's how it looks like. So the more workspaces you create for each of your project, or maybe multiple developers, the more pods that it's going to run.
Right.
And obviously the assumption is that the underlying Openshift cluster has enough capacity for you to run those.
So yeah, if you have 500 developers, having a cluster for just CodeReady Workspaces is entirely a thing, right? Like I would imagine, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I mean, sure, you could have mega clusters with your entire application stack running on it with CodeReady Workspaces and everything else, but that would be like a huge cluster, right? Like I could definitely see like a bunch of clusters with CodeReady Workspaces being like a cluster that folks log into and then deploy from into other clusters.
Right. At that point, I would advise you to have multiple clusters. And it's easy to manage them, frankly. And upgrade them. So one team may want to upgrade to latest and greatest, and they want to be independent of the other. So there's no problem in running another cluster and just running CodeReady on it. So you can do that.
Absolutely. That's been awesome. So we're reaching the top of the hour. Is there anything else you want to squeeze in here?
Yeah. So I just wanted to show like 6 magic tricks with CodeReady Workspace. So
okay.
So let me just tee up my slides a little bit, and then I can show you. So this is something that we talk to developers, and it's like, if you have to tell me like top things, what would that be? So this is the rundown of that. So the first thing is that you can actually go from runtimes to production and vice versa in a very clean fashion. You can pull from private registries. You can start from image or recipes. You can have pre-built custom stack, and also sync your current Openshift workspace using OC sync. So your workspace can connect to a production cluster if you want to debug. I mean, not that I'm recommending it, but sometimes companies are now doing A/B testing and canary releases and so on and so forth. That's a limited production, right? And if you want to connect to it, then you have a way to do that today with the CodeReady Workspace. And then you can start with any one of these bits. So we make it very streamlined for you, to get started. So there are multiple entry points. So that's number one. The second one is we support multitude of languages, as you have seen. Autocomplete, refactoring. It's a complete IDE experience that's provided to you. Of course, this is a sliding scale, so every other month there's something new that's coming up. So it's an arms race, but we are pretty close to getting it feature complete, in the sense that it gives you a very good starting point so that you can actually have a reasonable experience. And we continue to add new things to it, right? So debugger is a big thing. Like, debugger in the browser. If somebody would have said that 5 years ago, I would have said, no way.
Yeah, how's that
But
possible?
it's
Exactly.
it's possible now, right?
Yeah.
So that's the second one. The third one is you have various ways in which you can import your project. So if you have an existing project on the Git server, you can bring it. You can connect it to your existing Git repo or a zip file, whatever. So we allow you to do that. You can live sync a repo to a container. That's also possible. Public, private, repos. All of these combinations are possible for you on day one. So you really don't have an excuse like, I cannot start, frankly. So we have taken all those excuses away. It's just a matter of you experimenting with it and getting comfortable with it now.
Right.
And then this is my favorite. This is what I was talking to you about. Is we have this CodeReady Workspace server running, and this this IDE in a browser running. But if you like Eclipse or if you like Intellij, you can actually continue to run on your laptop, but use your API. So CodeReady Workspace APIs provide you ability to run the containers on the server. You can do a remote debugging. You can do logging. So you can actually continue to use your ID that you like, and then leverage the CodeReady Workspace environment as a cluster that you run your workloads on. And then at your convenience, maybe venture into this side where you can, open the browser and start editing there for maybe bugs that you have to fix quickly and move on. And just take this journey and figure out what your what's the right combination for you, right? It's not either or, as I said.
Right.
So that's the fourth one. And then we have all seen, like, there's several tool chains. So for issue management, we have Jira, for example. For CI/CD, we have Jenkins, or Bamboo, or some of these tools. It integrates very nicely as part of the factory URL, and basically a factory URL is something that you can click on in a documentation or in a Jira issue, and when you click that, this entire environment comes to life for you in the browser. So just like right click, open a new tab, and when you do that, the entire CodeReady environment comes to life with the code that you have to edit, and goes to that line number, frankly, if you're fixing a code defect, and gives you the entire environment in the browser. You don't have to do anything. And once you fix that issue, you can just close it and then close your Jira issue, or forward that job to Jenkins, and you're good. So this is something that we enable today, and you can embed those URLs in your documentation, in your issues, so on and so forth. And that has been pretty popular because it lowers the barrier to entry, and it makes it that much more faster for people to jump in and do something with it. And then obviously, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to ask, do we have like setup guides anywhere for different IDEs?
You mean to connect remotely?
Yeah.
So
that might.
Yeah. So
that'd be something awesome.
Yeah. So the APIs are published. So there's documentation out there to tap into.
Okay.
So and there are few blog articles that have been written to address this, and I'll be sure to pull them out after this session and share it with you. You can publish it. So yeah, I mean, this has been done actually, and I will dig up those articles and make it available. We did something on developer.redhat.com about this, because that's the whole point of having the APIs up front, right?
Right.
APIs give you that portability, so it enables you to do that. So I'll dig that up for you.
Thank you very much. And folks, if you follow me on Twitter or just hang on the channel a little bit longer, as soon as Zohaib gives them to me, I will post them here, and I will post them on Twitter with a link to the video as well.
Yep. And then the last thing is collaboration. So this gets overlooked a lot, especially like when you're bringing in new developers. We are giving you one-click onboarding for your new developers, so they don't have to download VMs, create VMs, install databases, all that kind of stuff, that's gone. So one-click onboarding. It's role-based access control enabled, which means that you can actually limit the type of users and what they can and cannot do, right? Another great feature is define your stacks and samples, the quick start that I showed you. Those quick starts can be as loose as this is a Java environment, do whatever you want, or as tight as develop a web-based application that complies with this, struts or whatever framework, for example. And that's the only thing that is going to be allowed for web applications. So that's locked in, so you can go either way. Resource limits can be configured, pre-commit feedback. So, all this that is part of the day-to-day development cycle that happens anyway, with or without CodeReady, right?
Right.
We actually give you a better way to collaborate with this in an integrated fashion, so that you still have to work hard, you still have to implement features. Let us take the distractions away from you and give you like an environment that you can focus on. So those are the 6 magic tricks that I wanted to show. And just to close that thought out, CodeReady Workspaces are best, in terms of integration. Like when you look at the IDEs, virtual labs, and also CI/CD pipelines, CodeReady Workspaces represent the intersection of that. And really, all these 3 things come together to life in an orchestrated setup that you can upgrade at your pace, and you can scale it to as many developers as you want very quickly.
Yeah, it's awesome. So to answer, Michael has another question in the chat about using Intellij for development. I'm assuming that Intellij has support for language server protocol, which means we have a plugin somewhere, either JetBrains or Red Hat, that plugs into CodeReady Workspaces, I'm assuming. But you just basically, that language server, you configure Intellij to use the CodeReady Workspaces language server as opposed to some other one on a remote machine somewhere, essentially. I can't Google the docs. My Google foo is failing me. So yeah, please, when you can, let me have those docs, especially for Intellij if you have them. But yeah, the language server protocol is really what enables all of this, right?
Yep. And there are multiple levels of integration. So you can integrate as a very basic with just Git. So Git check in, check out, and then you can see the same thing on that side. That's the basic. Then you can do rsync setup with language server, so on and so forth. So yeah, you can go as exotic as you want and as standard as you want.
Cool. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. So not a link, Michael, but definitely a push in the right direction. I'll get you a link here as soon as I can. Michael, also, if you just want to email me, cshort@redhat.com with any other questions you have, feel free. And I can get them routed and answered for you. So yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to show off?
Yeah. So as you know, this topic is getting a lot more traction with COVID environment, and I just wanted to say that people are thinking about it very actively. So if you have a use case that we haven't covered, I would invite you to bring it to us. If we don't have a ready-made solution, we will figure something out for you.
Yeah.
So that would be my feedback. And we are a very open source company, open culture. So whatever we do, you guys see that out in the open. And we are looking for ways to make it easy for developers to start adopting newer technologies and with the stuff that they already know, and then increase your depth. So let us know if you don't. Yeah, let us know if you have something that you haven't seen here or heard me talk about it, and I'll be happy to take it up and address it, even with my engineering team.
There you go. Yeah, and I'm the same way, right? So if you have an example, a use case, just reach out and we'll try and find or get you an answer or build an answer if we have to, given the right circumstances. I'm sure that could happen. Yeah, like I'm super, super excited about this. I think that as time goes forward and more compute moves back towards data centers and away from devices themselves, this will be more common in the future. This will become the norm, as it were, with the pre-baked CodeReady Workspaces all set, ready for you to go to log into and just start coding.
Right.
Awesome. So if folks have questions, they know where to reach me. Where do you want them to reach out to you?
So I have a Twitter handle. You can reach out to me directly on that. ZBlueJ.
Oh, nice.
Don't ask me how I came up with that.
No,
I'm a bird photographer.
no questions. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I do photography of birds and landscapes. So I was looking for a cool Twitter handle, and a blue jay happened to be, it popped in, and
Nice.
that's. But yeah, I mean, Twitter or even my email is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in chat. Is that all you got, Zohaib? You ready to close this thing out?
Well, there's a lot of things that I can cover, but I think this is a good point for us to close it and take additional questions or go into other use cases as a follow-up.
Yes. So yeah, the questions have stopped. So that's why I was kind of wrapping up here. Wait, are the slides available?
Yes, I will make them available.
Okay.
I will send it to you, Chris, and you can share them at
there
your
you go.
channel.
Yeah. I will find that answer by the end of the week. We will have a slide share or something where all slides are by the end of the week. I promise, folks. This has been a constant question, and I'm tired of waiting for the quote correct answer. So I'm just going to make my own. So yeah, without further ado, Zohaib, thank you very much for joining us today. Folks, tomorrow we have quite the lineup of stuff going on, right? Like we have our normal developer experience office hours on Tuesdays. We have Openshift Commons briefing talking about cloud native transactions and IBM Cloud Pak for applications. And then another stream forwarding OCP logs to secondary systems like Splunk or Syslog,
nice.
wherever. So 3 good streams tomorrow. And actually, I think one of our famous people, Andy Block, is doing one of them. I could be wrong. You know Andy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Andrew Block. Yep. He's doing the one with the secondary systems. So forwarding OCP logs. Oh, yeah, that's going to be a good one. Oh, that's going to be awesome. So, yeah, use the log forwarding API. Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Zohaib, thank you. I look forward to maybe next time we come back and maybe we can build out an environment ourselves and draw up in a project or something. That'd be kind of cool.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Anytime. Feel free to come back whenever you feel like it.
All right.
Awesome. I'll catch everybody. Stay safe out there. Stay healthy, and just stay sane. Thanks. Appreciate it, everybody.